In the hushed courtroom in Ridgeview City, Judge Marcus Blackwood stares down at the 17-year-old boy standing alone at the defendant's table. The judge's voice drips with contempt as he addresses the teenager who dares to represent himself. "Young man, this isn't some high school debate club. You're facing serious charges that could affect the rest of your life. Where exactly did you get your law degree?" "TikTok University." Laughter ripples through the courtroom, but the boy, Daniel Zhang, remains perfectly still, his expression unchanged. Then, without warning, he begins to speak. What follows leaves the entire courtroom speechless as this teenager dismantles the prosecution's case with the skill of a seasoned attorney, citing obscure legal precedents and recent court decisions that even the judge hasn't heard of yet. But Daniel Zhang is hiding something far bigger than his mysterious legal knowledge. Behind his calm exterior lies a secret that will shake the Ridgeview justice system to its core. This 17-year-old prodigy isn't just fighting his own case. He's orchestrating an elaborate plan to expose the corruption that wrongfully imprisoned his mother, prove his own innocence, and bring down the powerful figures who think they're above the law. The morning sun filters through the tall windows of courtroom 217, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Daniel adjusts his thrift store suit. The sleeves slightly too long, but pressed perfectly, thanks to his grandmother's careful attention. The gallery behind him is packed with curious onlookers, drawn by the unusual sight of a teenager representing himself in superior court. Judge Blackwood shuffles through his papers, his titanium-rimmed glasses perched on the edge of his nose. His reputation for harsh sentences and zero tolerance for what he calls millennial audacity is well known throughout Ridgeview County. "The charges against you are serious, Mr. Zhang," the judge continues, his voice cutting through the tense silence. "Unauthorized access to school systems, manipulation of administrative records, and attempted interference with academic integrity protocols. Do you understand the gravity of these accusations?" Daniel's voice remains steady, showing no trace of intimidation. "Yes, Your Honor, I understand perfectly. And you still insist on representing yourself. This isn't a social media challenge, young man. This is a court of law." "I do, Your Honor. Under Ferretta versus California, I have the constitutional right to self-representation, provided I make this choice knowingly and voluntarily." The prosecutor, Diana Sullivan, shifts uncomfortably in her chair. Something about this case has felt wrong from the start, but District Attorney Reynolds had been insistent. "Make an example of the Zhang boy." Judge Blackwood's eyes narrow dangerously. "Very well, Ms. Sullivan, you may proceed with opening statements." As the prosecutor stands, Daniel's mind drifts to 4 weeks earlier. He sits in his small bedroom, surrounded by law books borrowed from the state library. His best friend, Marcus Chen, paces nervously beside his desk. "You're out of your mind, you know that?" Marcus says, running his hands through his hair. "Just let your grandmother hire a lawyer." Daniel doesn't look up from his notes. Can't. They'd ask too many questions. About what? The fact that you've been secretly studying law for the past 2 years, that you're some kind of legal savant who can memorize entire case histories, that you passed the state bar exam at 16 under a fake identity. "Keep your voice down," Daniel warns, though his grandmother is working a late shift at the restaurant. "Nobody can know about that. Not yet." Marcus stops pacing, his expression serious. "This is about your mom, isn't it? About what really happened 2 years ago?" Daniel finally looks up, his dark eyes intense. "They framed her, Marcus. Reynolds and her network of corrupt officials. They couldn't beat her in court when she exposed their scheme, so they manufactured evidence, claimed she tampered with evidence in her cases. And now they're trying to do the same thing to me. But why? Why would they target you?" "Because I got too close. I found something in the school records, irregular grade changes, altered transcripts, all connected to the children of judges and prosecutors who were involved in my mom's case. It goes deeper than just what they did to her. The memory fades as Diana Sullivan's voice cuts through the courtroom. The evidence will show that the defendant deliberately accessed restricted school systems, attempting to alter records for his own benefit. Daniel makes notes, his handwriting precise and measured. He knows what's coming next, the fabricated access logs, the planted evidence on his laptop. But he's prepared. 2 years of study, of watching his mother's case, of learning every legal precedent and procedure he could find. It all comes down to this moment. Judge Blackwood watches with growing interest as Daniel stands for his opening statement. The boy's posture is perfect, his voice clear and confident. Your Honor, the prosecution's case rests entirely on circumstantial evidence and fundamentally flawed technical analysis. By the end of this trial, I will prove not only my innocence, but also demonstrate a pattern of misconduct that calls into question the very integrity of this prosecution. In the gallery, a man in an expensive suit slips out his phone and types a quick message. The Zhang kid knows something. How do you want to handle this? The response comes moments later. Whatever it takes, shut him down. Daniel continues his opening statement, unaware of the forces already mobilizing against him. But he's prepared for this too. The evidence he's gathered, the connections he's mapped. It's all carefully hidden, ready to be revealed at precisely the right moment. The real battle is about to begin, and despite his youth, Daniel Zhang is ready to shake the foundations of a corrupt system that thought it could silence the truth forever. The morning proceeds with the prosecution's first witness, the school's IT administrator, as Daniel prepares for cross-examination. He catches sight of his grandmother in the gallery. Lin Zhang sits straight-backed, her weathered hands clasped tightly in her lap, her face a mask of composure that only her grandson can see through. They share a brief glance, a silent acknowledgement of everything at stake. 2 years ago, they'd sat in this same courtroom, watching helplessly as Emily Zhang, respected prosecutor and devoted mother, was sentenced to 7 years for a crime she didn't commit. Daniel can still hear the bang of the gavel, see the smug smile on D.A. Reynolds' face. Today, that same gavel rests in Judge Blackwood's hand. But this time, Daniel isn't helpless. This time, he's ready. Mr. Zhang, Judge Blackwood says, you may begin your cross-examination. Daniel stands, straightening his tie. In his mind, he can hear his mother's voice from years of watching her in court. The truth is like a steady river, sweetheart. No matter what dams they build, it always finds its way forward. Thank you, Your Honor, Daniel begins. Mr. Peterson, could you please explain to the court the exact nature of the security protocols in place on the dates in question? The IT administrator blinks, clearly not expecting such a technical opening question from a teenager. As he begins to answer, Daniel allows himself a small smile. The first crack in their carefully constructed case is about to appear. Daniel stands at the podium, his questions for the IT administrator precise and methodical. Mr. Peterson shifts uncomfortably in his seat, increasingly aware that this isn't going to be the easy testimony he expected. So, Mr. Peterson, you testified that the unauthorized access originated from my laptop at 2:35 p.m. on September 12th, correct? Yes, that's what the logs show. And where was my laptop at that time? According to the network data, in the school library. Daniel removes a document from his folder. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence Exhibit A, the attendance record from my AP chemistry class, signed by Dr. Wilson, showing I was in his laboratory on the 4th floor from 2:15 to 3:30 p.m. that day. Judge Blackwood accepts the document, his expression thoughtful. Ms. Sullivan, any objection? Diana Sullivan stands, her unease growing. No objection, Your Honor. Mr. Peterson, Daniel continues, is it possible for someone to spoof a device's MAC address and make it appear that a specific laptop was accessing the network when it wasn't. Well, yes, but... And does the school's security system prevent such spoofing? Peterson hesitates. No, it doesn't. So you can't actually verify that my laptop was the source of the unauthorized access, can you? In the gallery, Marcus Chen grins. He remembers helping Daniel prepare for this moment, playing the role of witness, while Daniel refined his questions late into the night. Judge Blackwood leans forward, his interest piqued. The boy's line of questioning is surprisingly sophisticated, methodically dismantling the prosecution's technical evidence. The cross-examination continues, each question revealing another flaw in the prosecution's case. Diana Sullivan watches with growing concern, remembering her conversation with DA Reynolds the day before. "This case is a priority," Reynolds had said, her voice sharp. "I don't care what it takes. That boy needs to be convicted." When Sullivan had asked why this case was so important, Reynolds' response had been cryptic. Some doors need to stay closed. Back in the present, Daniel pulls out another document. "Mr. Peterson, could you explain these anomalies in the access logs from the past year?" Peterson examines the paper, his face paling. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Let me be more specific. These entries show grade changes for several students, but the timestamps don't match the official modifications in the system. Why is that? Before Peterson can answer, Diana Sullivan jumps to her feet. "Objection, Your Honor. This line of questioning goes beyond the scope of the charges." "Your Honor," Daniel responds calmly, "these irregularities directly relate to my defense. They establish a pattern of unauthorized access that predates the incidents I'm accused of." Judge Blackwood studies Daniel carefully. "I'll allow it, but tread carefully, Mr. Zhang." In the gallery, Lin Zhang watches her grandson with a mixture of pride and fear. She knows what he's doing, not just defending himself, but laying the groundwork for something bigger, just like his mother would have done. During the morning recess, Marcus catches up with Daniel in the courthouse corridor. "Dude, that was incredible. Peterson looked like he was going to faint." "Keep your voice down," Daniel warns, noticing a woman in a designer suit watching them from down the hall. "Did you get what I asked?" Marcus nods, his excitement fading to seriousness. "Yeah, but Daniel, it's worse than we thought. I found surveillance software on the school's network. They've been monitoring specific students' emails, web activity, everything. Whose accounts? Mostly kids whose parents work in the justice system. Judges' kids, lawyers' kids. There's something big going on here." Daniel processes this information, connecting it to what he's already uncovered. "They're gathering leverage," he mutters. "What? Think about it. What better way to control judges and prosecutors than having dirt on their kids?" In the gallery, Lin Zhang notices a man in an expensive suit enter the courtroom. He passes a note to DA Reynolds' assistant, who reads it and immediately leaves. Lin's years of running her restaurant have taught her to notice details others might miss, and something about this interaction sets off alarm bells. "Mr. Zhang," Judge Blackwood says, "your witness." Daniel approaches the podium. "Principal Mitchell, you mentioned my history of questioning authority. Could you be more specific?" "Objection, relevance," Sullivan interjects. "Your Honor, the prosecution opened this door by characterizing my behavior. I have the right to explore these allegations." Blackwood nods. "Overruled. Answer the question." Mitchell shifts uncomfortably. "You filed numerous complaints about grading policies, challenged administrative decisions, requested access to school board meeting minutes. Were any of these requests illegal?" "No, but in fact, weren't they all made through proper channels, citing specific school policies and state education codes?" "Yes, but the frequency..." "Principal Mitchell, are you aware of the grade changes made to certain students' records over the past 2 years?" The principal's face pales slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about." Daniel produces a document. "Your Honor, I'd like to enter Defense Exhibit C, a report showing systematic grade alterations for 14 specific students between 2023 and 2025. Judge Blackwood accepts the document, studying it with growing concern. His expression changes as he reads, and he glances briefly at his phone, where a text from his daughter remains unanswered. Principal Mitchell, Daniel continues, could you explain why these particular students, all children of local judges, prosecutors and prominent donors, had their grades altered without any supporting documentation? Before Mitchell can answer, Diana Sullivan stands. Objection, Your Honor. This goes far beyond the scope. Ms. Sullivan, Blackwood interrupts, his voice sharp. Given the nature of the charges against Mr. Zhang, I believe this line of questioning is relevant. Continue, Mr. Zhang. In the back of the courtroom, Detective Ramirez slips in quietly, notepad in hand. She's been investigating corruption in the DA's office for months, but something about this case feels different. The pieces are starting to align in ways she never expected. Daniel presents another document. Principal Mitchell, this is an email from your account to the school board dated March 15th. In it, you discuss implementing new special considerations for certain students. What exactly did you mean by that? Mitchell's composure cracks slightly. That was about accommodations for learning disabilities. Really? Then why does the attached list correspond exactly with the students whose grades were altered? Students whose parents all happen to work in the justice system or contribute significantly to the school board. The courtroom buzzes with whispers. Judge Blackwood bangs his gavel once, restoring order. He's watching Mitchell intently now, his earlier skepticism of Daniel replaced by growing concern. During the afternoon recess, Marcus catches up with Daniel in the courthouse bathroom. Daniel, you need to see this, he whispers, showing him his phone. I managed to access the school's security camera archives. Look at the timestamp on the day you supposedly hacked the system. The footage clearly shows Daniel in his chemistry class at the exact time the unauthorized access occurred. But more importantly, it shows someone else entering the empty computer lab, someone they both recognize. That's Mitchell's son, Daniel breathes. And is that D.A. Reynolds' assistant with him? Yeah, this was never about you accessing the system. They needed a scapegoat because someone was getting too close to their operation. Before Daniel can respond, the bathroom door opens. A man in a tailored suit enters, his presence filling the small space. Mr. Zhang, he says smoothly. A word. Marcus tenses, but Daniel gestures for him to leave. The man waits until they're alone. You're making powerful people nervous, kid. Smart as you are, you have to know how this ends. Drop this line of questioning, plead guilty to a lesser charge, and everyone goes home happy. Daniel meets his gaze, steadily. And if I don't? The man's smile doesn't reach his eyes. Your grandmother works late at that restaurant, right? Dangerous neighborhood. Be a shame if something happened. He leaves Daniel alone in the bathroom, the threat hanging in the air like smoke. Daniel's hands shake slightly as he splashes water on his face. They're playing hardball now, which means he's getting close to something big. Back in the courtroom, Diana Sullivan watches Daniel return, noticing his slightly pale complexion. Something's wrong. She glances at her notes, then at the man in the tailored suit, now sitting behind D.A. Reynolds. The pieces are starting to come together in her mind, and she doesn't like the picture they're forming. Judge Blackwood calls the court back to order. Mr. Zhang, are you ready to continue? Daniel straightens his tie, his voice steady despite the churning in his stomach. Yes, Your Honor. As he resumes his cross-examination, Lin Zhang slips out of the courtroom, heading for the law library. She remembers something from her daughter's case files, a similar pattern of threats and intimidation. If she's right, the same people who framed Emily are now targeting her son. Detective Ramirez watches the proceedings with growing interest. The parallels to Emily Zhang's case are becoming impossible to ignore. She pulls out her phone, sending a quick text to her partner. Pull everything we have on the Zhang evidence tampering case. Something's not right. Principal Mitchell's testimony continues to unravel under Daniel's questioning. With each answer, with each document presented, the outline of a larger conspiracy begins to take shape. But Daniel knows he's walking a dangerous line now. One wrong move, and it won't just be his future at stake. Zhang moves quickly through the law library's dusty shelves, pulling out files from her daughter's old cases. Her hands shake slightly as she finds what she's looking for. A case from 3 years ago involving Ridgeview Development Corporation, D.A. Reynolds' biggest campaign donor. She spreads the documents across a quiet study table. The pattern jumps out immediately. The same method of evidence manipulation, the same types of witnesses suddenly changing their stories, even the same man in the tailored suit appearing. At crucial moments, her phone buzzes with a text from Marcus. Mrs. Zhang, Daniel needs to see this. Found bank records. School foundation connecting to offshore accounts. Meanwhile, in an empty conference room 2 floors below the courtroom, Diana Sullivan meets with Detective Ramirez. She closes the door carefully behind her. What am I looking at? She asks, examining the files Ramirez has spread across the table. 5 cases in 2 years, Ramirez explains, all involving defendants who were getting too close to exposing corruption. All originally investigated by Emily Zhang before she was convicted, and all showing the exact same pattern we're seeing with her son's case. Diana picks up a photograph. Who's this? James Sterling, a former FBI turned private security. He works for Ridgeview Development now. She taps the photo. That's him in your courtroom today, the man in the expensive suit. Back in court, Daniel continues his cross-examination of Principal Mitchell, the morning's threat still echoing in his mind. But he forces himself to focus. Principal Mitchell, could you explain these financial transfers between the school foundation and Cayman account number 47855? Mitchell's face drains of color. I'm not familiar with the foundation's financial details. Really? Because your signature appears on all the transfer authorizations. Judge Blackwood leans forward, his interest piqued. He spent the morning investigating his daughter's suddenly improved grades, and his patience with the prosecution is wearing thin. Your Honor, D.A. Reynolds interrupts, standing abruptly. This line of questioning is irrelevant and potentially defamatory. Ms. Reynolds, Blackwood responds, his voice cold. You've been remarkably interested in this case for a simple school computer violation. Care to explain why? The courtroom tenses at this unusual exchange between judge and district attorney. Daniel notices James Sterling shift forward in his seat, his hand moving to his phone. Principal Mitchell, Daniel continues, were you aware that these transfers coincided exactly with the grade changes we discussed earlier? Before Mitchell can answer, the courtroom doors open. Zhang hurries in, placing a document on Daniel's table. He glances at it quickly, his eyes widening slightly. Your Honor, the defense requests a brief recess to review new evidence. Crawford studies Daniel's face. Granted. 30 minutes. In the courthouse hallway, Daniel reads through his grandmother's discovery. The connections are undeniable. The same shell companies, the same pattern of witness intimidation, even the same bank. Accounts. Daniel. Diana Sullivan's voice makes him turn. She glances around before speaking quietly. There's something you need to know. The evidence against your mother. I've been looking into it. The key witness. The one who claimed to see her tampering with evidence. He worked for Ridgeview Development. Daniel's mind races. The same company that donated $500,000 to the school foundation last year. Marcus interrupts, joining them. Through a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands. Mr. Zhang. The smooth voice sends a chill down Daniel's spine. James Sterling approaches, his Italian leather shoes clicking on the marble floor. A word, Anything you have to say to my client, you can say to me, Diana interjects, surprising everyone, including herself. Sterling's smile doesn't waver. Ms. Sullivan, are you now representing Mr. Zhang? That would be problematic for your office, wouldn't it? She's not representing me, Daniel says quickly, protecting Diana from professional retaliation. But she is a witness to this conversation. Sterling studies them both before speaking. You're making this much harder than it needs to be. There are things in motion that you don't understand, people who won't appreciate having their arrangements disrupted. You mean people like Richard? Ridgeview? Daniel asks, watching Sterling's reaction carefully. The same man who had my mother convicted when she got too close to exposing his company's bribes. For the first time, Sterling's composure cracks slightly. You're playing a dangerous game, boy. No, Daniel responds, his voice steady. I'm playing a legal one, and I'm about to call checkmate. As Sterling walks away, Diana turns to Daniel. How much do you actually know? Enough to bring down D.A. Reynolds, expose Ridgeview Development's corruption, and prove my mother's innocence. But I need your help. Diana hesitates, her career and safety on one side, justice on the other. Finally, she nods. What do you need, Detective? Ramirez approaches, having witnessed the exchange with Sterling. Kid, if what you're saying is true, you'll need protection. These people play for keeps. I'm counting on it, Daniel says, because when they try to stop me, they'll have to do it in front of Judge Blackwood. And after what they did to his daughter's grades to keep him in line, I don't think he's feeling very cooperative. Back in the courtroom, Principal Mitchell fidgets in the witness stand, waiting for the recess to end. D.A. Reynolds huddles with her assistant, their whispered conversation intense and worried. Judge Blackwood sits in his chambers, staring at his daughter's transcript. The altered grades, the threats, the corruption, it all connects. His hands clench into fists as he thinks about how they used his daughter to manipulate him. The bailiff announces the court's return to session. Daniel walks back to the defense table, his steps confident. In his hand is the evidence his grandmother found, proof of a conspiracy that goes far deeper than anyone imagined. Principal Mitchell, he begins, his voice clear and strong. Let's talk about your meetings with Richard Ridgeview last summer. The principal's face goes completely white. In the gallery, James Sterling reaches for his phone, but it's too late. The truth is about to come out, and there's nothing he can do to stop it. Detective Ramirez silently positions two plainclothes officers near the exits. She's seen enough cases to know when the dam is about to break. Diana Sullivan grips her pen tightly, ready to document everything. This isn't just about one teenager's case anymore. It's about exposing years of systematic corruption. Lin Zhang watches from the gallery, her heart pounding. 2 years ago, she watched helplessly as her daughter was taken away in handcuffs. Today, she's watching her grandson dismantle the very system that destroyed their family. The proud smile she's been holding back finally breaks through. Judge Blackwood leans forward, his earlier skepticism completely replaced by focused attention. He's spent years playing their game, compromising his principles to protect his daughter, but not anymore. Today, justice will finally have its day in his courtroom. Principal Mitchell's composure crumbles under Daniel's precise questioning. Sweat beads on his forehead as he glances nervously between D.A. Reynolds and James Sterling. Let me rephrase the question, Daniel says calmly. Did you or did you not meet with Richard Ridgeview on July 15th at the Ridgeview Country Club? I may have had a lunch meeting. And during this meeting, didn't Mr. Ridgeview discuss the need to maintain certain students' academic standings to ensure continued donations to the school foundation? Before Mitchell can answer, D.A. Reynolds rises sharply. Your Honor, this is completely irrelevant to the charges at hand. Judge Blackwood's voice cuts through the courtroom like ice. Ms. Reynolds, given that my own daughter's transcript appears to have been altered, I find it extremely relevant. Answer the question. Mr. Mitchell. Mitchell loosens his collar, his resistance finally breaking. Yes, he whispers. Ridgeview made it clear that his contributions depended on certain considerations. The gallery erupts in murmurs. Lin Zhang slips out of the courtroom, her phone pressed to her ear. Detective Ramirez? That witness you mentioned from Emily's case, I found him. He's ready to talk. At the prosecution table, Diana Sullivan watches the scene unfold with a mixture of horror and vindication. The manila envelope hidden in her briefcase feels heavy. Internal emails and documents that prove the DA's office knew about the grade-fixing scheme all along. Principal Mitchell, Daniel continues. How many students' grades were altered under this arrangement? Objection. Reynolds' voice carries a note of desperation. Overruled, Blackwood snaps. And Ms. Reynolds, you might want to consider your own position very carefully right now. Mitchell stares at his hands. 37 students over 3 years. All children of people Mr. Ridgeview wanted to influence. Daniel produces another document. Your Honor, I'd like to enter Defense Exhibit D. These are bank statements showing payments from Ridgeview Development to offshore accounts linked to the school foundation. Each payment coincides with grade changes for specific students. In the gallery, Marcus frantically types on his phone, sending a message to Daniel. Security footage downloaded. Shows Sterling threatening 3 witnesses last week, sending to Ramirez now. James Sterling rises smoothly from his seat, heading for the exit. Judge Blackwood's voice stops him. Mr. Sterling, I suggest you remain. The FBI will want to speak with you. Sterling freezes, his hand on the door. 2 federal agents are already entering the courtroom, their badges visible. DA Reynolds' face has lost all color. She shuffles through her papers, knowing her carefully constructed case is unraveling. Your Honor, given these developments, the state requests a continuance to review. Denied, Blackwood interrupts. Mr. Zhang, please continue. Daniel picks up a new document, this one marked with the DA's office letterhead. Principal Mitchell, are you familiar with this memo? It's dated 3 months before my mother's conviction, discussing how Ridgeview Development needed to handle the Zhang situation. Diana Sullivan stands, her decision made. Your Honor, as an officer of the court, I feel compelled to disclose additional evidence relevant to this matter. She removes the manila envelope from her briefcase. Miss Sullivan, I advise you to consider your career carefully, Reynolds warns. I'm more concerned with justice, Ms. Reynolds, something you might want to reacquaint yourself with. Diana approaches the bench with the envelope. Judge Blackwood reviews the documents, his expression darkening. Ms. Reynolds, approach the bench, now. As the DA walks forward, Daniel catches movement in the gallery. His grandmother has returned, accompanied by Detective Ramirez and a man he recognizes from newspaper photos of his mother's trial. The key witness who testified about evidence tampering. The witness, Thomas Martinez, looks nervous but determined. Ramirez guides him to a seat, 2 uniformed officers positioning themselves nearby. Your Honor, Daniel says, the defense calls Thomas Martinez. DA Reynolds spins around. Objection, this witness isn't on the list. Your Honor, Daniel interrupts. Mr. Martinez has direct evidence of conspiracy and witness tampering relating to both my current case and my mother's conviction. Given that the prosecution has opened the door to discussing my history of questioning authority, his testimony is now relevant. Crawford studies Martinez, then nods. I'll allow it. Ms. Reynolds, I suggest you sit down. As Martinez takes the stand, Lin Zhang grips her hands tightly in her lap. This is the moment they've been working toward. The chance to expose not just the school's corruption, but the entire system that wrongly convicted her daughter. Mr. Martinez, Daniel begins. Could you tell the court about your meeting with James Sterling 2 years ago, just before my mother's trial? Martinez glances at Sterling, who stares back coldly, but Sterling's usual intimidating presence is diminished by the FBI agents now standing near him. He told me what to say, Martinez says quietly. Threatened my family if I didn't testify that I saw Emily Zhang tampering with evidence. But I never saw anything like that. Never. The courtroom falls silent as the implications sink in. Judge Blackwood's voice is heavy with authority. Detective Ramirez, please take Mr. Sterling into custody. Ms. Reynolds, remain in the courthouse. The FBI will want your statement as well. As Sterling is led away in handcuffs, Daniel meets his grandmother's eyes. They both know this is just the beginning. The evidence they've uncovered goes far beyond grade fixing and witness tampering. It reaches into the highest levels of Ridgeview's power structure. Principal Mitchell slumps in the witness stand, broken. I'll tell you everything, he says, suddenly. About Ridgeview, about the other cases, about what really happened to Emily Zhang. All of it. Judge Blackwood bangs his gavel. This court will recess for 1 hour while I contact the chief judge. Mr. Zhang, I believe your mother's case will need to be reopened immediately. As the courtroom clears, Diana Sullivan approaches Daniel. You planned this all along, didn't you? Used your own case to expose everything. Daniel straightens his tie. Sometimes the only way to fight a corrupt system is from the inside. They thought charging me with computer crimes would shut me up. Instead, it gave me exactly what I needed. A courtroom where they had to confront their own evidence. The pieces are falling into place, but Daniel knows the fight isn't over. Ridgeview Development's influence runs deep, and there are still people in power who will do anything to protect themselves. But for the first time in 2 years, the truth is finally coming to light. The hour-long recess stretches to 2 as a flurry of activity transforms the courthouse. FBI agents move through the building with purpose, securing records and conducting interviews. Local news vans begin gathering outside, drawn by whispers of corruption and scandal. In Judge Blackwood's chambers, Daniel sits beside his grandmother while the judge confers with the chief judge via speakerphone. The gravity of the situation is reflected in Blackwood's grim expression. The Zhang conviction is officially under review. The chief judge's voice crackles through the speaker. Given the evidence of widespread tampering and corruption, we are ordering an immediate investigation into all cases involving Ridgeview Development Corporation over the past 5 years. Lin Zhang grips her grandson's hand tightly. Blackwood ends the call and turns to them, his earlier hostility completely gone. I owe you both an apology. I should have seen this sooner. You couldn't have known, Your Honor, Daniel responds. They were careful to keep each piece isolated. Only when you connect everything does the pattern become clear. A knock at the door interrupts them. Diana Sullivan enters, her face flushed with urgency. You need to see this, she says, spreading documents across Blackwood's desk. These were in a sealed file in Reynolds' office. Receipts, emails, offshore account numbers. It's a complete paper trail showing how Ridgeview bought influence throughout the county. Meanwhile, in an interview room down the hall, DA Reynolds sits across from 2 FBI agents. Her usual confidence evaporated as they lay out document after document. Ms. Reynolds, the senior agent says, we have evidence of at least 27 instances where your office dismissed cases against Ridgeview Development or its subsidiaries. Care to explain? Before she can answer, her phone buzzes. The caller ID reads Governor's Office. The agents exchange knowing looks. In the courthouse library, Marcus works frantically at a computer terminal, following the money trail deeper into the corruption. His fingers freeze over the keyboard as a name appears on the screen. Daniel, he texts, you're not going to believe this. The payments don't stop at the county level. They go all the way to the state capital. Detective Ramirez escorts Thomas Martinez to a secure location, coordinating with federal marshals for witness protection. Her phone hasn't stopped ringing. Since the story broke, other witnesses are coming forward, years of silence finally breaking. Back in the courtroom, Principal Mitchell continues his testimony, now under the watchful eyes of federal agents. His earlier reluctance has been replaced by a desperate need to tell everything before someone can silence him. The grade changing was just the surface, he explains. Ridgeview used the school foundation to launder money, create fake jobs, hide payments to officials. When Emily Zhang started investigating their construction contracts, they needed her gone. Daniel listens intently, each detail filling in another piece of the puzzle he spent 2 years assembling. A commotion at the courtroom doors draws everyone's attention. Richard Ridgeview himself strides in, flanked by expensive lawyers. "Your Honor," one of the lawyers begins, "we request an immediate gag order on these proceedings. These baseless allegations are causing irreparable harm to my client's reputation." Judge Blackwood's response is ice cold. "Counselor, your client's reputation is the least of his concerns right now. FBI agents are currently executing search warrants at Ridgeview development offices across 3 counties. Ridgeview's face darkens as he spots Daniel. "This is all because of a teenager's vendetta? Do you have any idea who you're dealing with, boy?" "Actually, Mr. Ridgeview," Daniel responds calmly, "I know exactly who I'm dealing with, including your meetings with state officials last month about the new highway contract. The one where the proposed route mysteriously changed to use land owned by your shell companies." Ridgeview's composure cracks. "How did you—" "The same way I found everything else. I followed the money. It's amazing what people put in emails these days, thinking no one will connect the dots." Diana Sullivan watches the exchange with growing concern. Ridgeview's presence means things are about to escalate dramatically. She catches Detective Ramirez's eye, giving her a subtle signal to increase security. Lin Zhang receives a text from William Chen, her daughter's former colleague. "Media's picking up the story. Governor's office is already doing damage control. Be careful. This goes higher than we thought." In the gallery, reporters scribble furiously as Mitchell continues detailing years of corruption. Names of judges, prosecutors, and politicians fill their notebooks. The story is exploding beyond anyone's expectations. "Your Honor," Daniel addresses the court, "given these revelations, I move to submit additional evidence regarding the broader conspiracy that led to my mother's wrongful conviction." Judge Blackwood nods. "Proceed, Mr. Zhang and Mr. Ridgeview. I suggest you remain in the courthouse. The FBI will have questions for you as well." As Daniel presents the evidence connecting years of corruption into a clear pattern, he notices his grandmother slip out of the courtroom with Detective Ramirez. They're heading to the detention center where his mother is held, armed with court orders for her immediate release. The afternoon wears on as more dominoes fall. Other judges arrive at the courthouse, drawn by revelations about their own compromised cases. The FBI sets up a command center in a conference room, coordinating raids and witness interviews. Marcus sends another urgent text. "Daniel, they're deleting files at City Hall, but I got copies. Wait until you see who else is involved." The story is growing beyond the courtroom, beyond Ridgeview City, becoming a scandal that threatens to reshape the entire state's power structure. And at the center of it all stands Daniel Zhang, the teenager they underestimated, who turned his own prosecution into a weapon against corruption. Judge Blackwood calls for another recess, but no one moves to leave. They can all feel it. This is history in the making, the moment when years of corruption finally face the light of justice. Late afternoon sunlight streams through the detention center gates as Emily Zhang steps into freedom for the first time in 2 years. Lin runs to embrace her while reporters shout questions and cameras flash. Daniel hangs back, suddenly overwhelmed by the moment. His mother looks thinner, harder, but her eyes are sharp as ever as she takes in the scene. Detective Ramirez stands nearby, ensuring no one interferes with the family reunion. "You did this," Emily says quietly when Daniel finally approaches. You found a way. Before Daniel can respond, his phone buzzes with an urgent message from Marcus. They're moving against you. Ridgeview's lawyers filed emergency motions in 3 courts. They're trying to suppress everything. Back at the courthouse, Judge Blackwood deals with the avalanche of emergency filings while fighting his own battles. His daughter sits in his chambers, tears streaming down her face as she explains how Ridgeview's people pressured her to stay quiet about the grade changes. They said they'd destroy your career, Dad, she sobs. Show evidence that you'd been taking bribes for years. Blackwood's hands clench into fists. Sarah, listen to me. You did nothing wrong. They're the ones who are going to pay for this. In the main courtroom, Diana Sullivan faces intense questioning from her own colleagues. The U.S. attorney himself has arrived to oversee the expanding investigation. Miss Sullivan, when did you first become aware of the systematic corruption? In the DA's office? There were always rumors, she answers carefully, but it wasn't until Daniel Zhang's case that I found concrete evidence. E.A. Reynolds was unusually invested in prosecuting him, and when I started looking into why, she pulls out more documents, emails showing Reynolds' late-night meetings with Ridgeview, offshore transfers disguised as campaign contributions, and lists of cases that were suspiciously dismissed. Richard Ridgeview paces in a conference room with his lawyers, his empire crumbling around him. Fix this, he demands, whatever it costs. Sir, one lawyer responds, the FBI has your emails. They have the financial records. More witnesses are coming forward every hour. Then find the witnesses. Ridgeview slams his hand on the table. Do what we always do. That's exactly what got you here, a new voice announces. FBI agents enter the room, warrant in hand. Mr. Ridgeview, we need to discuss your recent attempts to contact and intimidate federal witnesses. Meanwhile, Marcus works frantically to preserve evidence as deletion attempts hit the city's servers. He's coordinating with FBI cyber units, showing them the back doors he discovered in the school systems that led to everything else. The grade-changing system was just the start, he explains to the agents. They used the same network to transfer and hide files about all their operations, construction contracts, judicial bribes, campaign funds. Local news has become national. Satellite trucks line the courthouse square as reporters piece together the story of how a teenager exposed years of systematic corruption. Lin Zhang organizes protection for key witnesses, drawing on her restaurant connections and community networks. She's learned from her daughter's case. Evidence means nothing if witnesses can be silenced. Emily Zhang reviews the case files in Judge Blackwood's chambers, her prosecutor's instincts sharp despite 2 years behind bars. They'll try to claim all the evidence is fruit of the poisonous tree, she warns. Argue that Daniel's initial access to the school records was illegal. Let them try, Daniel responds. Everything I accessed was through proper channels, public records requests, open source documents, legal database searches. They just never thought anyone would connect it all. A commotion erupts in the hallway. The state's attorney general has arrived, along with federal prosecutors and FBI supervisors. This is no longer just a local corruption case. It's becoming one of the largest political scandals in state history. Judge Blackwood calls an emergency session. The courtroom is packed with attorneys, investigators, and reporters. Richard Ridgeview sits with his legal team, looking significantly less confident than before. Before we proceed, Blackwood announces, I want to address the multiple emergency motions filed to suppress evidence. Having reviewed them all, I find no legal basis for suppression. Mr. Zhang's investigation methods, while thorough, were entirely legal. Daniel stands to continue presenting evidence, but a message from Marcus makes him pause. State Election Committee records just leaked. Shows Ridgeview funneling millions through fake companies to control judicial appointments. Governors. Office implicated. Diana Sullivan slips him a note. U.S. attorney offering deals to smaller players. They're starting to turn on each other. The dominoes are falling faster now, each revelation leading to 3 more. D.A. Reynolds sits alone, abandoned by her former allies, as FBI agents box up files from her office. Your Honor, Daniel addresses the court. I'd like to submit evidence showing how the corruption in our local courts connects to a larger scheme involving state judicial appointments and construction contracts. Before Blackwood can respond, the State Attorney General stands. Your Honor, given the scope of these allegations, my office needs to... With all due respect, Daniel interrupts, your office received detailed reports about this corruption 2 years ago and did nothing. In fact, he produces another document. Here's an email showing your deputy authorizing the cover-up. The courtroom erupts in chaos. More dominoes fall. More powerful figures realize their careers are ending. And through it all, Daniel Zhang stands firm, armed with evidence meticulously gathered over 2 years of patient planning. Emily Zhang watches her son with pride and amazement. The boy she left behind has become a force of justice, systematically dismantling the corrupt machine that destroyed their family. But in the back of the courtroom, unseen, a desperate man makes a phone call. It's all falling apart. We need to move to contingency plan B. Tonight, evening descends on Ridgeview City as a black SUV peels away from the courthouse. Inside, Detective Ramirez checks her rearview mirror for the 3rd time in a minute. We've got a tail, she mutters to the Zhang family. 2 cars back, dark sedan. Emily Zhang notes, her prison-honed instincts sharp. Been with us since Cedar Street. Lynn grips her daughter's hand while typing one-handed on her phone, alerting their network of supporters. After 2 years of preparation, they've built a web of allies throughout the city. Restaurant workers, teachers, honest cops, and community leaders, all ready to help. At the courthouse, Judge Blackwood faces his own battle. The Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court is on the phone, his tone carrying implied threats. Thaddeus, you need to shut this down. You're not seeing the bigger picture. With respect, sir, Blackwood responds, steel in his voice. I see the picture perfectly. And if you try to interfere, I'll add your name to the growing list of compromised officials. In the courthouse library, Diana Sullivan pores over case files with trembling hands. She's just found evidence linking her mentor, the legendary prosecutor, James Morgan, to the conspiracy. His signature appears on dozens of suspicious dismissals, all benefiting Ridgeview's interests. Her phone buzzes. A text from an unknown number. Walk away now. Last warning. Marcus works frantically at his computer, fighting off sophisticated cyber attacks, trying to wipe the school's servers. He's already backed up everything important, but each attack attempt leaves new evidence of who's behind the cover-up. Daniel, he texts, they're getting sloppy. Each hack traces back to computers in the state capitol, one in the governor's office. The real battle is just beginning, and the night ahead promises to be the longest of their lives. Evening descends on Ridgeview City as a black SUV peels away from the courthouse. Inside, Detective Ramirez takes another sharp turn, trying to lose their tail. We need to get you somewhere safe, she tells the Zhang family. They're not going to let this evidence reach tomorrow's hearing. The evidence is already secure, Daniel assures her. Multiple copies, multiple locations. Marcus made sure of that. But it's not just the evidence they're worried about now. Emily Zhang recognizes the desperation in their opponents' moves. She's seen it before in cases where corrupt power brokers realize they're cornered. The sedan behind them suddenly accelerates, trying to force them off the road. Ramirez's police training kicks in as she executes a perfect defensive driving maneuver, keeping them steady. Call it in, she shouts to Lynn, who's already dialing dispatch. Within minutes, police cruisers converge on their location. The sedan disappears down a side street, but the message is clear. This fight has moved beyond the courtroom. Back at the courthouse, Judge Blackwood reviews new evidence with federal prosecutors. His daughter's testimony about the grade-fixing scheme has opened up fresh leads, revealing how Ridgeview's organization groomed and compromised officials, children to control their parents. Your Honor, a federal prosecutor begins. We've uncovered similar operations in 3 other counties. They targeted students whose parents held key positions, created compromising situations, then used that leverage to control votes and contracts. Blackwood thinks of his daughter, her tears, as she explained how they trapped her. His signature on falsified court documents suddenly makes sense. They'd ensured his cooperation by threatening to expose his daughter's manipulated grades. Diana Sullivan bursts into the room. They're moving files out of the DA's office right now, multiple shredding trucks. Blackwood reaches for his phone, but stops as the lights flicker and die. The courthouse's power has been cut. In the darkness, Marcus's voice comes through Daniel's phone. They're trying to crash the entire city network, but I've got something they don't know about. Copies of everything on servers they can't reach. Daniel pieces it together. They're not just trying to destroy evidence, they're creating a diversion. Ramirez's police radio crackles with reports of suspicious activities across the city, break-ins at law offices, fires at storage facilities, anything that might hold damaging documents. But Zhang has spent 2 years preparing for this moment. Her network springs into action. Honest cops protect key locations. Hospital staff secure medical records showing falsified evidence. Teachers and administrators guard school documents. Emily Zhang reviews more files in the back of the moving SUV, her attorney's mind finding new connections. Daniel, look at this pattern. The same shell companies that funded Ridgeview's projects also appear in my old cases. Cases where witnesses mysteriously changed their testimony. Daniel connects the dots. They weren't just bribing officials, they were running a full witness. Tampering operation. Ramirez's face grows grim. That matches what we just uncovered. There's a list, people they plan to silence permanently. All of you are on it. The SUV turns onto a secure federal compound. For now, the Zhang family will be under federal protection, but tomorrow they return to court. Tomorrow they fight back. In his chambers, lit only by emergency power, Judge Blackwood makes a decision. He calls the U.S. attorney directly, bypassing state officials he no longer trusts. This ends now, he says firmly. I want federal marshals at tomorrow's hearing, and I want arrest warrants ready for everyone involved. No matter how high up they go. Diana Sullivan works by flashlight, organizing evidence for the morning session. Her mentor's betrayal stings, but it strengthens her resolve. She finds a note in an old case file, written in James Morgan's distinctive hand. Make the Zhang problem go away, or we'll handle compensation. The power returns gradually across the city. Marcus sends a final update. All files secured. They tried to wipe everything, but I've got full backups, plus evidence of who ordered the deletion. Tomorrow is going to be interesting. In the federal safe house, Daniel prepares for the most important day of his life. Tomorrow, he'll present evidence that will shake the state's power structure to its core. 2 years of work, of hiding his knowledge, of playing the system at its own game. It all comes down to this. Emily and Zhang watch their son with pride and concern. He's become more than they ever imagined, but the forces aligned against them are powerful and desperate. Are you ready for tomorrow? Emily asks softly. Daniel nods, his expression determined. They thought charging me would shut me up. Instead, they gave me exactly what I needed. A public forum where they can't hide from their own corruption. Outside, federal agents patrol the perimeter. In the city, more honest officials choose sides, realizing they can no longer stay neutral. And in hidden offices, desperate men make desperate plans, knowing tomorrow could end everything they've built. The night stretches ahead, tense with anticipation. Tomorrow, the truth comes out. Tomorrow, justice finds its voice. Tomorrow, everything changes. Dawn breaks over a transformed courthouse. Federal marshals stand guard at every entrance, their presence a clear message to local authorities who might have other loyalties. News vans circle the block like sharks, sensing blood in the water. This courtroom has seen history, Blackwood begins, his demeanor far different from that first confrontation. It witnessed the exposure of corruption that many thought untouchable. But more importantly, it saw the birth of real change. Emily. Zhang sits with Lin in the front row, watching their son address the gathered officials. The personal cost of their fight shows in the grey at Emily's temples, the tired lines around Lin's eyes, but so does the triumph. We didn't just expose corruption, Daniel tells the assembly. We proved it could be defeated, not just fought, not just contained, but systematically dismantled. Diana Sullivan, newly appointed head of the National Prosecutor Reform Initiative, presents the final statistics. 273 convictions overturned, 412 corrupt officials indicted, billions in stolen funds recovered. Marcus's secure systems monitor the proceedings, part of the new transparency protocols now standard nationwide. His voice comes through the courthouse speakers, final corrupt network nodes identified and neutralized. The old system is officially dead. Lin Zhang's organization, now a federally recognized oversight body, has become the model for witness, protection, and whistleblower support across the country. We created more than a network, she explains to international observers. We built a community dedicated to protecting truth-tellers. Detective Ramirez reports the last major arrests in the corruption scandal. They thought if they held out long enough, everyone would lose interest. They were wrong. Emily Zhang reviews case files from other states implementing reforms. The patterns were the same everywhere. Once people knew what to look for, corruption couldn't hide anymore. Judge Blackwood signs the final implementation orders. These reforms aren't just rules on paper. They're a commitment to real justice, earned through sacrifice and courage. Daniel opens his law school acceptance letter, choosing to attend while continuing his reform work. Harvard, Yale, and Stanford all offered full scholarships, but he selected a program that would let him maintain his oversight role. Some people study law to make money, he tells reporters. I'm studying it to make sure justice stays just. Diana Sullivan establishes permanent corruption monitoring protocols. We're not just reacting to problems anymore, we're preventing them. Lin coordinates with international reform groups as their methods spread beyond borders. Corruption speaks. The same language everywhere, she says. So does justice. Marcus's security systems become the new standard for government transparency. They can't hide in the shadows anymore. Everything leaves traces. The family reflects on their journey during a quiet moment in chambers. The personal cost was high, but the impact will last generations. Remember when they thought charging me would shut us up? Daniel asks his mother. Emily smiles. Instead, it gave us the perfect platform to expose everything. Judge Blackwood shares news of his own legacy, a judicial conduct center bearing his name. From skeptic to champion, he muses. Life's funny that way. The sun sets on Ridgeview City, different from the place where their story began. The corrupt system that once seemed invincible lies broken, but the Zhang family knows their work isn't finished. Justice isn't a destination, it's a constant journey. Their legacy lives on in laws, reforms, and lives restored. A teenager who dared to fight corruption became something more, a symbol of hope. The truth found its way out, carried by courage and determination. Nothing will ever be the same, and somewhere another person stands up against corruption, inspired by their story. The fight continues. A new generation of lawyers studies the Zhang case, learning not just about law, but about courage. Reform. Movements across the globe adapt their methods. proving that no corrupt system is truly invincible when faced with determined opposition. Daniel Zhang's journey from accused teenager to catalyst for change becomes more than history. It becomes a blueprint for justice, a reminder that the most powerful weapon against corruption isn't just evidence or law, but the unwavering conviction that truth will prevail. The story of the Zhang family, once a tale of persecution, transforms into a legacy of empowerment, showing that even in the darkest corners of power, light can shine through if someone is brave enough to strike the first match. As night falls on Ridgeview City, the lights in the Judicial Conduct Center still burn bright, a beacon for those who believe in justice. The work continues, the vigilance never ends, but now there's hope where once there was only fear. The system didn't just change, it transformed, because one family refused to be silenced, one teenager dared to fight back, and countless others found the courage to stand with them. This isn't just an ending, it's a beginning. The start of a new chapter in the never-ending story of justice versus corruption, right versus might, truth versus power. And somewhere in Ridgeview City, a new voice speaks up against injustice, knowing they're not alone. The light still shines, the fight goes on, and hope endures. The Zhang legacy continues, not just in reforms and laws, but in the hearts of those who believe that justice is worth fighting for, no matter the cost. For in the end, it wasn't just about winning a case. It was about changing the world, one truth at a time.